Greetings, everyone. This is the Cosmic Consciousness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sage, and it is my deepest honor and privilege to interview someone I have known since 1990. Herb Adkins opened the path for me to meet David Davis. David has been my structural integrationist, Rolfer, since 1990, and I can tell you my own personal experience about all of that if it comes up appropriately during our conversation. But let me just give you a brief introduction to David. David has been practicing structural integration for 48 years. David has been privileged to study with spiritual masters from many traditions. This has led to a very eclectic and integrated life, honoring the spirit in all things and beings. Welcome, David.
Welcome, Dan.
My first question is, what do you remember about your first sense of calling to be leading a spiritual life, to be of service to humanity, and the kinds of activities, the kind of work that you've been committed to for your entire life? Do you remember anything from your childhood, earlier, later, development?
Well, good question, and I'm going to answer it relative to what we talked about before we came on the air, and that is that, you asked about my childhood and higher consciousness. I grew up in a very restrained and constrained Christian family, and my mom was a Sunday school teacher and stuff like that. But I was a dreamer, and I didn't. So, what you asked earlier is, when did I find out or know something about cosmic consciousness? And I was a dreamer when I was a kid. I had dreams that would come true, verbatim. I'd get involved in a sequence of events where I'd go. In fact, I could still remember one from when I was 6 years old, where I was walking in a store, near Christmas time, and I bumped one person with one shoulder, bumped a lot of traffic, and bumped somebody with the next one. And I went, wait a minute, I dreamed this. And I turned around, and then the third bump, which was in the dream, came because I bumped into somebody by turning around. And that was normal for me. So I wouldn't, didn't happen every day, but I had what I would now describe as prophetic dreams, and starting quite early in life. And since I didn't know the difference, oh, wow, this is a great question. I just remembered something that I had completely forgotten, which was that I had out-of-body experiences when I was in grade school, and a lot of times it would happen when I was in a dream state, and I would tell my mother about it, and she was pretty sure that the devil had me, or something like that, and she thought that her answer to that was that I needed religion. Let's put it that way. And so being a bright young guy, or thinking I was one, I didn't respond to that all as well as she would like me to. And then, but it wasn't uncommon for me to have, if you will, paranormal experiences. And I remember having one event, and I would say I was maybe in third grade, where I was walking on the sidewalk, and I was only about 4 or 5 houses away from home, and popped out of body, and found myself out in outer space, and looking back at the Earth, and boom, just as quick, I was back in body. And so I ran home crying to tell Mom about it, because it was like, it's a little weird, Mom. And so, her answer was the same as before. So as I, went along and growing up, I just would have some paranormal experiences, which, the term paranormal wasn't in operation in those days. And so, I got to be my own exquisite little Abby normal. And so, cut to high school, and I took an experimental class in 1964, and I was a junior in high school, and the experimental class was psychology. There'd never been offered a psychology class before, and it was so new that we didn't have a textbook, so we had to subscribe to a new magazine called Psychology Today, and then we would read articles during the course of the week, and discuss them a bit and one thing another. And in that magazine, there were 3 articles by a man named Sam Keen, and he was a philosopher, and the title of the article was Sing the Body Electric, and it was about his experience at the hands of Dr. Rolf at Esalen Institute. So he was one of those people who was going up to Esalen for, it's the center of pre-New Age, I'll say, thought, and human potential in particular. And Dr. Rolf was an on-site scholar with Dr. Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy, American Gestalt, if you will. And so, as I was reading his articles, the letters would stand off the page about 4 inches. They literally came off the page at me. And none of the other articles did this. And I thought, that's interesting. So I had to file away the word Rolfing at that particular point. I was in Denver, Colorado. There were no Rolfers or anything like that in the area at the time. Hardly knew anything about it. Only knew what I read from the articles. And then as I went through college, or to college, I was in a pretty bad auto accident when I was 18. Car flip, landed on the roof, and I could have easily been killed, but had virtually no injuries, and just a little bit of glass in my back. And to this day, I can remember details of that particular event, like it was one of the dreams that I'd had. But I knew something not good was going to happen. And curiously, there was a song on by a band called the Hollies, which included Graham Nash. And the song was Stop, Stop, Stop. And Greg, the driver, failed to navigate a right angle corner at the end of the road. We were still doing about 40 miles an hour when we got to that point. But I could have been profoundly injured, and I think my guides protected me because I had more and better things to do in this lifetime. So I needed to get hit upside the head, if you will, in order to move on. And in fact, I landed on my head in the footwell, and then Greg, the driver, landed on top of me. So I had some pretty nasty whiplash problems, among other things. cut to the age of 25, and I was so rigid from whiplash that I couldn't turn my head. I had to turn my whole torso. And at the time I was doing farm labor, and I also worked on the railroad, and I just got progressively more restricted. And then a friend of mine, I was in southern Colorado by that time. A friend of mine came up from Santa Fe and said, "Hey, there's a Rolfer down there. I think you need to see this guy because, he had helped her. She was a friend. She got hit by a bus in England, one of the double-decker English buses, and, popped off her big toe because the tire was on it when it hit her. And so anyway, I was like, oh, yeah, we're all thinking. And so I thought, okay, there's something about that. I need to pay attention to this. So I went down to Santa Fe, was interviewed by Don Johnson, and he said, okay, well, I can see you in a month or month and a half, whatever it was. Two other things happened, and these are important to your question. And I hope these are not too lengthy answers, but It really has to do with how dumb I was about following my path and what it took to get this stubborn guy, that would be me, to change the course of life. So after I'd had that car accident, I had gotten quite adept at self-medicating. Because I had among other things, a closed head injury that was undiagnosed. And so cut to 25, and I started getting the Rolf work. And a number of things happened very quickly. The first one was that with the first session is that within about 15 minutes, maybe 20, I felt like I knew what was going to happen next, and that's what would happen. And it was so familiar to me. It was like, oh wow, this is like being home. So I I just reveled in that, and I grew in it. And within 3 sessions, I started being able to turn my head without shooters down my arms, I was popping my neck and head all the time because I had so much cervical pain. And so the other thing that happened at that time is that I had a knowing somewhere around March that I needed to be in South America before the end of the year. No reason to know what that was, but it's like, hey, you gonna go, aren't you? And later to find out that the comet Kohoutek first came into the solar system around March of that year. Kohoutek was interesting because it was Kohoutek himself was a Czechoslovakian astronomer, and he was the first guy to see or spot a comet coming into the solar system before it got here. So it received his name. Well, the Kohoutek, the comet, was going to be going behind the sun on the winter solstice, which would be accompanied by a solar eclipse. It's like, what an amazing cosmic event! I've got to be there. And in point of fact, Time magazine and Newsweek magazines both had cover articles in that time frame about this forthcoming event, because they thought, among other things, it might be bright like Halley's Comet was supposed to be, and so that there was going to be large tail and one thing and another, but we'd be able to see all of this stuff all at once and be able to, in that darkened state, maybe be able to see a couple of planets. So it described where those were as well. So to make a really long story short, or at least brief, and hopefully still interesting for your people. So my 26th birthday, happened on December 19th. So that's 3 days before the winter solstice. And I had met a magician. He was an alchemist, and he was a guru of Kundalini yoga. And he took me out hunting mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. So, and I'd had mushrooms before. I happened to like them. And so we found some mushrooms, and, I ate them. And as we walked back into town, Pereira, we walked down the reverse course of the Stations of the Cross. There was a trail with all the stations. And by that time, I was coming on. I was starting to sweat and one thing and another. And so I thought, I'm going to fast until the solstice. So I was staying with some people who became friends. I picked up a traveling partner who was the perfect guy for that particular journey. Another one of those synchronous events that took place. And so on the 21st of December, we went and we thought, well, okay, we're going to go down into the state of Risaralda. I was in Colombia, and we were going to camp out in the mountains to see this eclipse. And so we did some hiking and one thing and another, and we saw some gunfire and one thing and another. And it turns out that, Che Guevara's group, the Shining Path, was extremely active in the area at that time. So we climbed a fence, went into this meadow, and at some strange hour in the night, we were rousted by 5 guys who were robbing us, right? But they held us at gunpoint, and I'm buck naked, right? It's Colombia. It's warm. So I was there, and these guys started to hold us at gunpoint, and they wanted to not be shot before we did, because only a fool would be out there without a gun. So, hey, we're fools, Dote Americanos. And so anyhow, they wound up sitting us down, and I had a pistol in the base of my skull, as did my compatriots, while they went through our stuff. And we had the feeling that we could die at any particular moment. So what we did is we sat down, and we had a last drink of water, and said something about, you never know when you're going to die, and let's go out on the highest frequency we can. So we started ohming, and so we did these long, loud, slow ohms, and they stood us up, and they said, "Okay, grab your gear." And it's pitch black, right? One of the things about eclipses is there's no moon the night before an eclipse, and so we're out in a meadow with knee-deep grass, and they're telling us to pick up our gear. And we picked up what we could see. There's a little bit that you can see. And then then they said, okay, walk. And they started walking us up this hill, and we could kind of see this trail. So we're walking up this trail, and we left about 100 yards behind, and I stopped. I said, "Hey, I don't think they're around anymore." And turns out the guy was right next to me, and he fired a shot into the ground right next to my foot. And I was like, okay, I'd be moving. And so we walked for maybe a quarter mile or something up this steep hill because we're on the barranca of a mountain, and we go over this rise and we start to go down the other side, and somebody had the bright idea of, hey, we don't know where we are. We have no clue where we are here. There's no visual reference, right? So we could see just the outline of this tree down ahead of us, and we walked to this tree, and we laid down, did our crying and releasing as much as we could in the moment. Also scared to death that somebody like that's going to come back and find us again. And then it rained cats and dogs the rest of the night. So we were, drowned rats. We woke up the next morning and we were about 20 feet from a cliff that, I think they decided they weren't going to waste any bullets on us. And thought we would go over the cliff. So the next morning we saw the eclipse, and then we all, did our best to get back to Pereira, where we were. I started meditating the next day. It was like, in fact, what I did before oming is I said, God, if you get me out of this one, I'll live a life of service from here on. And so, and I have. And I am, would be a more accurate way to say.
There are pieces of that story I've never heard before, as long as we've known each other and talked. And it's completely riveting and compelling. So, clearly this was a pivotal moment to begin meditating. Talk about your process of meditating.
The first thing that happened is I had the great privilege to take my last breath. So, there's a gun at the base of my skull, and I know it can be pulled at any instant. I was like, okay, that I love breathing. This is really a sweet thing. And so I inhale, exhale. I love this. I love breathing. It slowed me down to not look beyond the moment. There wasn't anything beyond the moment. So two things happened at that time. One is that I became a conscious breather. So I'm aware, I'm conscious of each breath. I'm here for it because it's so sweet. Breathing comes and breathing goes. We tend as people to ignore it. Breath. But breath is, doesn't seem like such a big deal unless you don't have any, or that you're looking at losing that. And people who are respiratorily compromised and stuff like that, they know about that. So breathing is very important. So that was the first thing that happened, and then the second part was that I found that I had to be more present. If I'd have been more present, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So those events, but the important thing is that it was really a great stepping stone for evolutionary process and me getting into walking the life that I need to live this life fully and to serve Creator. So I had to get out of the way. So the personality that was David prior to that died that night. And I've been bumbling along ever since.
Has the nature of your meditation, the multi-layered consciousness, has that changed over the years? Has it, as you've met different spiritual masters, how have they influenced that original sort of awakening and being present?
Um, every step of the road of life has been like that. Something that and I'm going to tell you the story, is that I got to a particularly lonely, miserable place when I was about 28, and where I sat down and I realized that prayers have power, and I prayed for someone to live my life with. And as you know, 2 weeks later, Lorraine appeared. Now, she would deny what I'm about to say, but she was a spiritual master who came into my life and directed and redirected me. I like to say, she's her Native American roots. She decided that I was worth turning into a human being instead of a personality. So she's played a key role. And since that time, 1 year after that, and you know something about this, we were called to see Babji in India. Again, a totally transpersonal moment, but Babji appeared to both of us. And it was, we were meditating, and it was old technology. It was like a slide projector where the slide has been in there too long and it gets melted. And then there's this kind of melting thing, and then there's a bright light. And that's literally how I saw it. And then at the other end of the light, it was like telescoping, looking through a telescope. There, in the mind's eye, was Babji standing by the Ganges. Time to come home. Time to come to Mother India. Time to come home. And 6 months later, life conspired in multiple ways to get us to India. What a glorious thing that was, is to go, if you will, purely on faith, purely on trust, purely on knowing, on an intuition, if you will. So, for example, this is so us. We were with our 15-year-old daughter. We got off of the 747 in New Delhi in the middle of the night, and we went through customs, and we got outside, and there was, there were cabbies and one thing and another, but we got there and we went, oh my God, we don't have a hotel room. We didn't even think about that. We don't have a reservation. We don't have so we were in awe, shock and awe, if you will, of all of a sudden, oh, wow, we trusted this thing totally. And just at that moment, a guy walks up and in very good English, pardon me, are there 3 people with rucksacks in that building? And I said, well, it's 747. We just came from Tokyo. Probably so. So our daughter, Chris, who was 15, was saying, let's just get back on the plane. Let's get back on the plane. Let's not ask any questions. We don't have to talk about it. Let's just get back on the plane. Let's just get back on the plane. I think it's time to just get back on the plane. It's talking a mile a minute. Yeah. And after about, I don't know, 10 minutes, the guy, pardon me, I have a room with 3 extra beds and my friends are not on the plane. Will you come back? Will you come with me to the hotel? Uh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. So the three of us get into this cab. There's a cabbie and there's another Hindi guy there. And um, and just as the cab is taking away off from the curb, another Hindi guy gets in the car, Indian man, I should say. I'm making an assumption it was Hindi. And and it only has one headlight, which is loose in its placement. So it's rattling over this way, it's rattling over that way. Oh, there's a camel. Oh, there's a Brahma. And that was our ride into the center of the city. And we went to an area that's called Konat Circus. And so we get to the street where the hotel is, and there are no lights. Absolutely, it's pitch black. There's no street lights or anything. And and get out of the car, and it's all of the street, of the sidewalk, is people on cots or sleeping on the ground. It's full of people sleeping, and there's a little sign about that big. It says "bright," and so it's a Japanese man, Shioji, angel of creator, that guy, and he says, once again, it's pitch black. So he says, "Come on!" And so we're walking toward this opening in the wall, and Lorraine and I were both thinking, as we talked about it later, we're going to die. This guy is taking us to our deaths. This is, and Lorraine was thinking, well, how am I going to explain this, to Chris's father that, something horrible happened to her. And so with great trepidation and equal amounts of trust, we started following him. And he goes, "Come on." And he's in the dark, right? It's pitch black. But we can hear his feet going up these steps. So we start going up the steps, step by step. We're going up. And then there's a corner and go back the other way. And then he gets up to the top of the stairs, and we can hear him knocking on kind of a glass door. And he says, "It's me. I'm here with my American friends." And we thought, oh, they're going to wait till we go inside to to kill us. And so a light goes on, and we're like, and we walk in. It's a nice hotel, and it's the lobby. And so we walk. Shoji took us down to his room. And we walk down the hall, and there's four kind of like cots. And he goes, "Pardon me, would you like some air conditioning?" And we went, "Yeah, because it's Delhi. It's hot, it's humid, it's muggy." And he takes two bare wires and he sticks them in the wall, and a swamp cooler comes on. And that was our introduction to New Delhi. And it was with complete and total trust and faith that we took those steps. And we had to have our doubts. And with every step, the path would get to be a little bit clearer. With every step, we would find that our steps were on the right path. So just a little bit more. So we then eventually got to Haldwani, and then we were going to go up to Paragon to see Babji. It's an 8-mile hike up a riverbed, and the river's running. The Gautami Ganga. And so we started walking. We had a porter for Lorraine's gear. We started walking, and we hear these beautiful children's voices off to our right. Bole Baba Ki Jai. And then on the other side of the river, Bole Baba Ki Jai, Bole Baba Ki Jai, Bole Baba Ki Jai. The entire 8 miles, these children sang us going up this river. And we got up to the we got up to Heidekan, and Brawudan, our porter, went we saw some Americans we knew, and they said we can't, and they were all really sunburned, and they said, oh, we can't talk to you, you're impure. And it just then the Brawudan comes back and goes, Baba, see you now. So we went over to the Shiv temple where Babaji was, and he blessed us and welcomed us, and told us where to bunk out, so to speak, and so we were blessed every step of the way, and Babaji. She was just saying this the other day. Babaji saved Lorraine's life, and she had been told by a Sikh fortune teller when we were in New Delhi, never cut your hair or your fingernails on a Tuesday. And it was a Saturday when we got there. And so on Monday, Babaji turns to Lorraine and myself and goes, tomorrow, you mundan, meaning shave your head, just like you did, shaved head. And that's to cut away, all of our history. And so then, and you really liked it there. It was so beautiful. And being around Babaji was so beautiful. But just being in his divine presence brings up all the stuff that's not so divine in us. And there's reflection that takes place. And so as we would talk about doing Mundan the following day, and we would go for half an hour and go, that's what an honor, we've got to do that. And the next half hour was, who's he to tell me to do this? We don't want to do this. And so the next 24 hours is bong, ding, 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 ding. And, so he just with a couple of words demonstrated our inherent contradictions, internal, and plugged us in totally, which he was the master of that. And so Tuesday comes, and we're like, ain't doing it. And so Lorraine packed her bags and everything, and I wanted to tell Babaji's people that we're sorry we couldn't stay there any longer, and we got to go. So I went up to a guy he called Black Boy, who was a German man, and he was training him to be a servant to serve. And went up to Black Boy, and his name was Christian von Trapp, and said, well, we got to go. We don't want to say, oh, you ought to stay. Well, no, Baba said, do Mundan. He says, well, that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. So Lorraine comes up and says, our bags are packed. We're ready to go. And I said, Christian says we don't have to do that. She goes, well, I thought we had to do that. And no, we don't have to do that. In fact, he says if we want to go across the river, we'll shave our heads now. And I said, I'm thinking about it. And so she came over and she talked to him and one thing and another, and he goes, oh, Babaji is 10,000 miles above us. You can't understand why he wants us to do things. You try to have your normal human understanding around Babaji, you're in for trouble. It just won't work. He is not like us. And in fact, for me, I pretty much settled everything by deciding and feeling that he was more of a hologram than a person. And then at a later point in this story, I can tell you some about that. But so we wind up going across the river, and our daughter Chris is like, "I thought we were leaving." And no, we're staying. And so we go across the river, and Black Boy says, "Oh, your hair is just falling off. I haven't shaved anybody's head where it just came off so freely. This is really interesting." And so we had to collect our hair, and then we were going to, commit it to the Ganges, personal history down the stream. So, or downriver. And so we did Mundan, and Lorraine's hair was long and parted in the middle, and she had this sunburned midline stripe, to which all of the people who were there, the Indian, and there were Tibetans and others who were there. And so we went over to show Babji that we'd done that, and he carried a stick about this big around, a staff. We'd be more out to it, danda, as they call him, and he was coming down the trail, and he's smiling, and then he takes his danda and goes, and stopped like right there, that much before he hit Lorraine's head, and then he just gently, lightly rubbed her midline racing stripe, I like to call it. So anyway, that was a peaceful and beautiful moment. And so we spent the rest of the day working on the river. They were building dikes and other things, and it was so peaceful and so beautiful. And there was a harmonizing event that took place with shedding, shall we say, the ego of looks and appearances. And so I don't know if you want to stop there. I can go on with Babji's stories. The interesting thing is that whenever I start talking about Babji, they're not my stories and they're not Lorraine's stories. They're all beings. And there's something, shall we say, all human, that we hear the stories different whenever we tell the stories. When we still have lessons that we're learning from events that happened with Babji almost 50 years ago.
The point that I was hoping you would get to, and you can tell now, is how Babji initiated you into a different level or different kind of meditation.
Well, so with most people, he said, don't meditate. His service was karma yoga, service to others, and that he was all about us serving one another, love one another, live a life of truth, love, and simplicity. That's really a hard thing to do. Oh, it's truth, love, and simplicity. Well, it's hard to tell the truth very often, let alone all the time. And it's, very challenging to be loving and open, kind, and generous with people, and then to be simple, to not need to be, ego involved, I guess I would say, or ego driven. That we were actually. So one day before we were about to leave, and I'd done my work across the river at the Shiv temple in the morning, and there was a little tea house down in the riverbed, And so I could see Babji coming, walking. He always walked barefoot. He never wore shoes. And it was rough terrain. And that is very rocky. River stones, but, very rocky. So I got a cup of tea, and there was a look that would happen for those of us who were there, which was just gazing into the distance. No thought whatsoever. Just so before I knew it, Babaji's standing next to me, and his feet had been oiled that morning, so there was this beautiful aroma emanating from his feet, his holy lotus feet. And Babaji wore really outrageous colors. No man wear colors like Babaji did. And so he had a white lungi on, and he had this deep cobalt blue shirt, silk. And so anyhow, he goes, you come. He gave me a name, Chaku Singh, and he never called me that by that name. He always called me Good Gentle. I was his Good Gentle. And, he wanted me to do something Good Gentle. And so anyhow, he says, Good Gentle, come. So he starts walking upstream. And then all of a sudden he starts to walk up Mount Kailash. Now, Mount Kailash is interesting because there are, I believe, 4 Mount Kailashes. And one of them is, prominent in Tibet. And but it's the place where the gods first set foot on planet Earth. And so anyway, he took me, and we started going up a side of Mount Kailash, and he said, clear trail. So he's walking ahead of me with cactus thorns and one thing another, no reaction to anything that may have gotten into his feet, but he's having me take out sticks and cactus and one thing another. I start throwing it down. Before I know it, there's 2 men down below, and they're taking and putting all kinds of wood, stacking that up right there, right where the river and the mountain meet. And interesting. And then I remember at one point that from what he was having me pick up, my hands were getting really scratched up, and it's cactus thorns in them and scratches, and then my hands were bleeding. And the thought I had at the moment was I'm doing Babaji's work. No harm will come to me. I was getting dirt into these cuts. Well, we're way out in the Comoan Hills. We're a long way from any medical services if needed. And when people needed medical services from there, they had to be taken down. So anyhow, I went, blood of Christ, Babaji's work, no problem. And I just kept clearing stuff and one thing or other. It took me up into a little cave, and he sat me down and he goes, you meditate. And I was like, oh, okay. And and by that time also, those guys down below had lit the fire, and there were big logs there, among other things. And so this fire and smoke, which I think was, burning off karma, if you will, at least symbolically, if not any other way. And so I sat at the mouth of this little cave. And earlier in the day, Babaji had said, be careful, there's a king cobra around today. Be very careful. And I thought, oh, jeez, he's putting me in a cage. There's going to be the cobra. Come on, just, what am I going to do if the cobra comes up? Oh my God. So, it's challenging when you have a fear like that come up and sit and meditate, for example. So, so I started to settle into breath and breathing, and I'm just sitting on the rocks. There's no cushion pad or anything like that, which was fine. And before long, then a lizard of about I didn't open my eyes, but about 8 inches or something like that is what it feels like, ran up my back and across my leg. And then another one and another one. Oh my God. Okay, he's telling me I need to chill out. And that went on for about an hour. I got less jumpy, but I was still pretty jumpy because they always came as a shock, right? I mean, they were running, so they jumped from the floor onto my body. So anyhow, I got to the point where and it was the middle of the day, mad dogs and Englishmen. So I had a bandana that I put over my eyes and across my face so that I wasn't going to get sunburned too much. And so I sat there and then moved into a different space, and I felt like I was settled in with everything around me, part of everything, and then I started to see a golden Om in my third eye, and it would pulse, and then there started to be circles of color around it, like the primary colors, and purple, then blue, then red, then orange, yellow, and green was in there as well. And then it would be pulse, and then it would light those up. And then it would pulse, and and it's like, I like this. This is a great show, and I just stayed in that state for an indeterminate period of time. And then finally, and I kept seeing that. And then the other thing that I would see was Babji's eyes inside my head. And and I do not doubt that he wasn't inside my head. And so then after a long time, which I figured the total time that I was there was about 2.5 hours. And after a long time, one of those guys that had been down below said, he says, "Baba, see you now." So I started to walk down that trail that I'd cleared, and the fire down below was still smoldering. But based on the movement of the sun, I figured it was, like as I say, 2.5 hours. And so it was a big fire. So then I walked down, and then I walked around to the Shiva temple, and Babaji was sitting there. And one of the things he used to do is draw watercolors. So I went up and I pranammed to him. And I noticed that the painting he had just finished was a golden Om with concentric circles of color, watercolor, around them, just as I'd seen it in my mind's eye. So that kind of kicked me off onto a new level and layer of being. And then 4 days later, so I started meditating 2.5 hours a day for twice a day, and we had left Harakan by this time. He sent us to a place called Nainital, which is a hill station where people would go, could afford it, would go there for the hot summer months, people from down below. And so so I was there, and we were in a youth hostel. And I woke up one morning. Ah, another important point was that Babaji said, you know, um, do the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. So everybody who was there was doing Om Namah Shivaya, which occupies the mind a little bit, and it's hard to focus on one thing. Simplicity. It's hard to focus for a long time. So I was doing Om Namah Shivaya, and and I woke up in the middle of the night, like 4 nights later, and I went to the the bathroom, and when as I started back to the room, it was like, oh my God, Om Namah Shivaya is doing me. I'm not doing that any. And I started to feel really faint, and I got back to the room, and then I was taken out of body, went to the light. Which seemed to be, it was the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful place, the most home. It was familiar, by the way, totally familiar. It felt like being at home, and I was there for when I was kicked out, and by that I mean I after 3 days I felt like I had to take a leak, and I crawled to the bathroom because I was pretty weak at that point, and then I crawled back to bed, and Lorraine had been away, and she came upstairs, and when I wasn't in bed, she's like, where are you? And and um, and um, uh, and and so I laid down, and truly I just wanted to go back. It's that beautiful over there, and shall we say on the other side of the day. And so I lay down, and I'm like, and Lorraine goes, "You're not leaving me." And she had packed up some of Dr. Christopher's anti-plague formula, and which is a really heavy garlic um, tonic. And so she poured some of that down me, and I was like, "Oh," kind of a shock to the system. I was like, "Whoa, why did you bring me back?" She's like, "You're not leaving me." So, that was that merely changed absolutely everything about everything.
A pathway that I've had to Babaji, and maybe even you, from the pathway kind of through Herb Atkins, our mutual friend who passed away in 1993, is the meditation of Kriya Yoga, which Yogananda has basically introduced to the Western world. And is that the kind of meditation? I mean, I would guess yours is qualitatively different, but if you're familiar with what I'm asking about with Kriya Yoga, is that something that the masses could find as a discovery process for self-realization?
Sure, it's a path and it's a process. It's very rare that the miraculous should intercede on our behalf, and 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 yet it's never that far away. It's always available. And it's the challenge is how does one invoke the divine and drop the facades. And yeah, Kriya Yoga is a viable path along that way. And as one moves along with self-realization, at least for me, and I believe it's so for Lorraine, we don't talk about that specifically in those terms, but self-realization is the best game in town, and in terms of spiritual awakening, that's a viable path to take us there. And that said, the same is true of almost all paths to the divine. They all go to the same place. By any other name, a rose is a rose. By any other name, God is God. And some people want only to use the English form of the divine, but the name isn't important. A name that cannot contain the divine, it's bigger than any of those words or concepts. So Yogananda's work is a viable work. Thich Nhat Hanh, fabulous. Lord Buddha had something to say about all of this.
Yeah. I am really reluctant to stop this because I don't care if anybody else is even interested in this, but I just could listen to you talk about this for hours. But I am sensitive to my wife, Peg, has told me, you really need to kind of keep these around an hour. And I think she's smart about that for, audiences.
Yeah. We talked about that.
Attention span and all of that. But, it's almost as if since we met in 1990, I can barely get enough of David Davis and Lorraine Davis anyway. So, I mean, I would love to have. So I know one of the things that's going to happen is I want to talk about, or ask you to talk about your experiences with your other spiritual masters, and particularly Ida Rolf, and how that has unfolded and intersected and been a confluence with your experiences with Babji. That was another item of interest for me to ask you about. So I know that we're going to have another podcast session, especially since we figured out some of the technical gremlins and all of this now. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that, you've got other things to do than sit and talk to me and whoever else is listening to the podcast.
Well, else is crazy enough to look at this.
Yeah.
I'm sure there will be some people.
Yeah.
Babji, just talking about Babji opens doors. I don't understand it. I don't understand Babji. But I can only attest to the profound transformational nature of who and what Babji is. And a lot of people, devotees, are, they're really attached to his physical form. But for Lorraine and me, his physical form wasn't him. He's in our lives right now.
And that is, it's going to sound a little cheesy or sappy, but in my mind, that is the true nature of cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Babji consciousness, Yogananda it all is the same thing. I haven't had the experience that you have where it takes you up. I've had little episodes of things like that, Kuan Yin's mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. So sometimes that is, just, I've realized that's going through my head. It just,
Great.
yeah. So these are the little miracles that sustain us and help us grow and make us realize that we're one. It's all one thing. But the other thing I need to ask you about, and we got to save this for next time, is, and I want you to think about this, but I also want to tease the next episode of our conversation. I love your statement that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so maybe that'll be what we start with the next time.
Sure.
In my mind, that means this oneness that we can actually recognize, realize, let it penetrate us is the real world. And there's kind of this fake world of, the material, human, day-to-day stuff that, is vital, important, but it's not quite as important.
Well, we have to learn our lessons in that world, and clear our traumas in that world, so that we can become clear enough to start to open to the grander spiritual scheme of things. And a lot of people learn it by dying. They call them near-death experiences. I call my experience with Babji a near-life experience, because I glimpsed the life that always is beyond this being.
Yeah. Well, and absolutely, this is one of the reasons I've been seeing you since 1990. That is what Rolfing, structural integration, does, is awakens you to life's issues, nonverbal release of traumas, past experiences that we didn't even know we had. So yeah, I think that's where we need to pick up next time. So
the issues are in the tissues.
Yeah. Oh, David, don't get us started on all of that.
Okay,
well, we need to, that's a great punctuation mark for this session. So I want to thank everybody for viewing this, and as you can tell, we're going to have David back for another session in the future, and we'll prepare some time as well for Lorraine. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but this is, hi, Lorraine. Say hello to everyone.
I've been listening.
Well, David's been talking about you a lot. But we're going to set a time. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can figure out a time where we can have a podcast discussion just with you, if that's in the cards.
And
so.
You want to ask her about how Babji saved her life.
Yes, that will be one of my first questions. So, well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and this has been the Cosmic Consciousness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sage, and until next time, peace to everyone. Thank you.
And love.